Yes, sir. What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday to everybody, and welcome to the Coach Cool podcast for episode number 114, our Friday discussion with Mr. Adam Powers. And it's been one hell of a week on the podcast, cross-promoting the new YouTube channel, Coob's Corner. I'm trying to come up with new ways, new content, new value for you guys every day of this week, and I loved it. I love that process. I love that challenge, and I hope you all got something out of it. Because, again, I really enjoyed it, so I hope value was found on your guys' end as well. And this conversation today was a phenomenal way to culminate the week. Talking with Adam, we're talking about his ultra marathon training and what that has entailed. We're talking about comparison and why you should compare yourself to yourself instead of external things or objects. We're talking books, we're talking wisdom, we're talking tactics. There's just so much in this thing that I think you guys are really going to enjoy and be able to grab onto at least a small something and run with it as we go into the weekend. So, again, welcome to the Coach Cool podcast. So happy you guys are with us today, and let's get this thing going. Okay, y'all, it is time to kick this conversation off. And today, in regards to this Friday discussion, I'm going to change up the format just a little bit. I usually write down a bunch of questions and I kind of work my way through them. With all the guests that I've had on previously. But I just want to be a little more organic with this thing today. I've been doing this or that with the podcast this previous week, and I want to continue that same exact approach in regards to this conversation today. And I think I have the absolute perfect guest to do just that with. He is a fellow thinker, a mover, a doer, and just an all-around fantastic human being. So I'm really excited to have him on the Coach Cool podcast today. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Adam Powers to the Coach Cool podcast Friday discussion today. Adam, what's up, dog? Thank you for coming on, and really excited to talk to you, man. Welcome.
Coach Coob, appreciate it, man. Proud to be on here and looking forward to the conversation.
No doubt, dude. And let's still kick it off with this. And for my true Coach Cool podcast fans, Adam was on with us probably 8-9 months ago. One of the very first Friday discussions that I did, but I wanted to have him on again. Kind of like I mentioned before with how I want to change up the format. So just real quick, Adam, in terms of the kind of little background on you, lineage, who you are, where you're from, what you got going on, if you could provide that to us here, I think that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, we'll keep it brief, but I grew up in Plymouth, Michigan, and I went to Kalamazoo College, played football, captain there, and that led me to a job out in New York for a couple of years, and then decided I needed to go travel, get a little adventurous, and I've kept that adventurous spirit, maybe to a fault, but I still got to do what I got to do. And I live back in Detroit now, and I work down there. I work with some different organizations, some nonprofits, do some stuff on the side with fitness and wellness, and love meeting good people like yourself, and continue growing personally and as a community. So,
got you. I'm with it. That's perfect. And I feel like we're similar in that sense where we've bounced around a little bit, done some different things, trying our hand in some different buckets to see what we really gravitate towards. And I think that's powerful. And I think keeping it general, especially early on in your career, maybe life, that makes a big difference in terms of kind of honing on your craft later on. So, just kind of hearing that background, maybe think of this, Adam. I wanted to ask you this because I had my brothers here this past weekend hanging out, and we were talking about similar things in terms of education and generalization early on, learning different skill sets, being around different people, doing different things to really try to find out what you are about personally, what you like, what you don't like, what have you. So in terms of, I guess, not even a sport life kind of growing up, but in terms of your careers and the different things that you've done, like, do you think it's a pretty powerful thing to kind of bounce around like you're doing? Like, of course, you would probably love to find your passion, I guess, initially and really hone in on something and go. But like, I would argue probably for you, since you have bounced a little bit, you haven't really necessarily found that yet. So like, in terms of keeping things a little bit more general on the forefront in terms of your career, have you found some good success and benefit in terms of really trying to figure out who you are and what you're about, so that kind of leapfrogs you into the future moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's vital to keep learning new things, everything you can. My career's been all over the place, but I realized that when we hone in on such a specific passion or whatever we want to call it, what that leads to is us chasing this title or chasing this certain position rather than a deeper construct like, my passion is community development, engagement, group dynamics, leadership, things like that, that those transcend industries and they transcend cities and countries. You can find that anywhere. And when the passion is something on a deeper level, then you don't get stuck in this, my passion is finance, so I have to be an accountant or a financial advisor. Like if that's the case, your passion to look deeper into yourself, sometimes that comes from reading books that you wouldn't normally read just for the sake of learning and educating and understanding various perspectives from all these different angles. So that's where I'm trying to hone in, and I'm still working on it, but figuring out that what I love is studying group dynamics, seeing how people interact with each other, who know each other, who don't know each other, who are from different cultures,
Right.
why they interact the way they do. And that has been pertinent in, everything from medical sales to technology sales to startups to entrepreneurial stuff. That stuff is apparent in all of those different industries.
Right. I totally get it. And I totally relate to that. And I loved how you said the different community stuff and different races and gender, and, like that's where our world's going, right? Whether it's technology or, just mixed community, like there's so much out there and so much to do and see and so much to learn. And if we just kind of pigeonhole ourselves too early on, whether it is a job or maybe a place to live, always living in your hometown, which obviously isn't a bad thing in and of itself. But like, to me, you got to go, you got to expand, you got to do different things. So, yeah, that makes so much sense. Now, in terms of kind of identifying your passions, not just career-wise, how do you kind of do that for yourself? Is it reading? Is it movements, which I know you're big on too? Is it, again, trying these different jobs? Is it hanging out with different people? Like, where do you kind of start for yourself when it comes to your passion, just trying to identify, again, who you want to become and what you want to do long-term, kind of in regards to that stuff?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been working diligently to become profoundly grounded in what it is I want to do and where I want to be personally. And I think what that's led me to is being able to find groups of people that also enjoy doing the things that I like to do. So it's not that movement leads to these group gatherings and community, but when you love to move and other people do too, now you have this very strong foundation on which to build connections and relationships. So I've narrowed down a couple things in my life that really helped me focus wholeheartely on that moment. And what that's led me to being able to do is think a little bit clearer, drown out some of the noise that whatever our society brings to us and our inputs of content and the rest of it. What the very narrow focus leads to these impressive, group gatherings, community events, these things where all of a sudden you meet people that you wouldn't normally think you'd be connected. And then all of a sudden you've got these deep rooted foundations, and then it leads to deeper conversations, recommendations on books and music and activities that if you're like, hey, if you like what you're doing right now, and we're both at this vulnerable state because we just worked our asses off running or working out, whatever we were doing. Now I trust you because I know you're willing to put in the work. And if you read that book and it helped you, it's probably going to help me. So there's that tangential relationships that come from putting yourself in a vulnerable situation and meeting people at that point.
Right. No, that makes so much sense. And I feel like a different way to coin that, where I've always kind of coined it in my head and that I've personally experienced for sure, and I've definitely been here, but also seeing other people do it too, is when it comes to connecting with other people and trying to identify different things in terms of our similar likes. Like there can be 100 things that we are similar with or similar in or have similar interest in. There could be one difference with a certain person. And all we really think about or identify with is that one difference. So it's kind of like an out or an escape to not really approach that situation or be around that person or whatnot. And I've tried to kind of re-engineer my own thinking, my own perspectives, where like, I don't care if there's 3,000 things that I disagree with or don't want to do with a certain person. Like we're very different in different ways. But if there's one or two things that we can really hone in on and not even agree on, but just maybe sort of like I want to be around that person, because to me, like I'm going to learn so much more in that situation, whether it is through movement or whether there's maybe we like books or maybe we like just find something similar with the person and hone in on there. Because again, that's how you develop those connections. And if that person is very drastically different from you, you don't have to kind of agree with them and everything or kind of take it as your own, but that's how you're going to learn and grow and learn new perspectives and do these different things. So like, is that kind of what you found in these situations? Like where, yes, I like to move and so does this other person, but like once you get to talking to them, like you realize how different you are, and not in a bad way, but just it opens up to so much more learning and growth and newness. Like, have you found that stuff when you kind of put yourself in these different environments through movement per se?
Absolutely. And I think that's a good way to put it, because it's you know, having found this very, you know, confident air about you, which I've known you for a while and you've always had, but to be able to silence those insecurities and be open to learning something new from somebody else. Mm-hmm. Now you've got that doesn't happen with people who are insecure about themselves. They hang on unnecessarily strongly to their own beliefs and their own thoughts and what they've always done. But once you open that up, because you're confident with yourself to say, I don't know everything, and I don't profess to have read all the best books or, you know, done all the hardest things. I want to learn from people. I want to read all the books I can. I want to meet people that are, you know, better than me and smarter and stronger, and understand how they do what they do with the same amount of time we all have. Yep. And to understand that it comes from a place of confidence and security in yourself to be able to continue learning from other people.
Right. For sure. For sure. And yeah, I think security is a great way to put it. Like, I'm confident enough in myself. Kind of, I think it was a Jordan Peterson book that I read where he talked about this, where you have to have one foot in the secure, you have to have one foot in the known, but then to learn and to grow and to keep manifesting yourself and kind of moving towards the person you're supposed to become, you always have to have one foot in the unknown as well. So it's like finding that fine line between being confident in who I am and being structured in that sense, but also still being open to the other stuff and grow. It's 1 foot in, 1 foot out in terms of that stuff. So like, yeah, man, like that's exactly what the game is. And I think if more people could potentially see that and own up to that, I think a lot more commonality and a lot more growth could be found if we could all try to take that on a little bit more. Not that me or you or anybody is absolutely perfect at it, but it's just more so trying to make that stuff happen. I think would put us in a much better spot for sure. So I appreciate that, dude. That makes a lot of sense. Now, again, I'm just kind of flowing with these ideas. We're going back and forth, and we talked about this off air a little bit. And you mentioned something that really struck me. And you said, there's some stuff in your life where you're kind of towing that same line that we were just talking about, where there's a fine line between being happy with something and also being unhappy without it. So like trying to navigate those two things. Where you kind of at with that personally in terms of, I don't know if you want to give context or what, but just kind of expand on that idea a little bit more for us. I think that'd be dope.
Yeah. So what that means to me is that when you're happy with yourself, when you're secure, when you're confident, and you find something else that adds to that, that's very important. What happens sometimes in our society is that people start to put their whole identity into a job or a title or a house or vehicle or a relationship. And now without that thing, you're unhappy. And that person or that thing isn't responsible for your happiness. That job isn't who you are, but sometimes people lose that identity in themselves in this job, because they feel like the only reason people hang out with me is because I have this job, or the only reason, I'm respected at home is because I have this type of house or car. The only reason that, I am who I am is because of this partner that I have. And that mindset of I'm happy with this person, like, yeah, of course. But if I didn't have that house or car or job, I'm still good. I'll still figure it out for myself because I know myself well enough. Versus without that, what am I going to do without that? And they become desperate. They become insecure to lose that. And it's that's where that dangerous mindset comes in. But we're so heavily exposed to that because of our, exposure to social media and to other people and to these highlight reels on all the different platforms. You see these people like, oh, that person is living this type of lifestyle and doing this, but we only see the good things, right? Like we don't see that they're they're struggling in some way, shape, or form. All we see is the good stuff, and we weigh that way too much in our life. So that phrase always reminds me, like, don't ever put your identity into something else that could potentially be gone. The only thing, you're being as good as you are with yourself, being able to sit in a room with no distraction silently and just think. There's a lot of people that struggle with that, myself included. I'm getting better.
Yep.
But I have a hard time where, if somebody were to say, hey, we're going to go sit in a room, you're not going to talk, you're just going to put your phone away, no distractions, no TV, no nothing, and just think for a while, that's intimidating to a lot of people because we don't want to be in our own minds.
Facts.
But when we get to that point of security to say, I'm all good. Is everything perfect? Certainly not. If it is, then you're just bullshitting yourself. But if you get to the point that you're comfortable going, hey, this happened and it wasn't great, but that's okay, and I can move on from that. Now all of a sudden, all these things that come into your life maybe are an added bonus, and that's great. Hey, I'm good with this job. I'm good with this wherever I'm at in life, and it's a whole crazy journey, but I don't need it for validation, for appreciation, for happiness, anything like that.
1,000%, 1,000%. That brings so many ideas to mind. And I guess the first one is this. I was reading about a study where, exactly like you just said, you put your phones away for 10 minutes or whatever, and they just solely hypothetically presented that question to a group of men and a group of women. And they said, if you had to just sit in a room for 10 minutes by yourself, I think the first question was, could you do it? Or two, would you rather give yourself an electrical shock? And it wasn't like just a little prick kind of shock. Like, it was a significant electrical shock to get you out of that situation. And I think the men, I don't remember the exact percentages, but it was like 60% of men would give themselves the shock just to avoid 10 minutes with their own thoughts. And I think the woman's percentage was a little bit higher. And I was flabbergasted by that. I'm like, yo, 10 minutes? You can't just sit there and be by yourself and think or pray or meditate? Like, just all you got to do is sit there. That's it. Or you could physically harm yourself to get out of that for a 10-minute time. And I was like, damn, man, like, that's really interesting to me. And I guess secondly was this, it was like, if we keep suppressing these things that bother us about ourselves, whether it's physically or emotionally or mentally, whatever, and we keep pushing them down, we keep filling our time with these different entities, whether it is working out or music or always being around people, and you never take time to sit down and focus and work on you, the more we suppress those things and keep pushing them deeper and deeper and deeper, like, when stuff really does hit the fan and that stuff resurfaces, when our world kind of crumbles around us, like, that's when some stuff can happen, and not in a very positive way. So, again, I'm no psychologist, I'm no therapist, no whatever, but, I just think it's so important to take the time to work on yourself in silence and think and read and just do these different things, because if not, you're going to kind of snap out of that one day and it's going to be a little bit scary. So, yeah, man, that's tough. But, like you said, I think we've all been there too. Like, of course, like, we all have those things in our lives that we identify with, just like, maybe it's getting out of a sport, right? When ball is done in college and you're moving on to the real world, it's like, who the hell am I without sport? And, that just doesn't solely apply to athletes. It's a worldwide thing with just about everybody out there. And yeah, man, that's a tough one. So I appreciate you sharing that. But moving back to movements a little bit, dude, I think I like to work out a little bit. I try to stay in shape. But every so often we go on Instagram or Twitter, and there's Mr. Adam Powers on his story with his watch showing, within 50 minutes, this cat is running like 11 miles. And I'm sitting there like, damn, dude, I just ran 2 miles and I am so over it. It's not even funny. This dude's just casually rocking out 10, 11, 12 miles at night or in the morning, then going to yoga, like what have you. So you're in the process of training for an ultra marathon, which I think is so cool. I think half marathon or even marathon, and I'd rather, maybe give myself that electrical shock and then some, but you're over here just, rocking out, training for this stuff. So, why this entity, why this process, why are you kind of training for this? Why did you choose to, make this a goal of yours, and what are you kind of learning and, enjoying about that process?
Well, I think the decision was, this ultra had come up in conversation. I like to move a little bit. I hadn't thought much about it. I never considered myself a runner necessarily, but the more I looked at it, the less I wanted to do it, and the more I realized I needed to do that.
Oh, I love it.
I get, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I get
1000%.
so the last whatever 5, 6, 7 years, I only do stuff that I'm good at, that I know I can do. I haven't learned a new skill or a new task or anything in a while. And yeah, I work hard, but that's like telling somebody who is good at numbers to just keep doing a lot of numbers. It's like you got to go push yourself a little bit. And I didn't, I looked at it and I was like, man, I don't think I can do this. And it just, in that moment, I was like, okay, I have to do this. And it's not going to be, it's not the 100-mile through the, Sahara Desert, but this is starting to push me to where I would normally look at maybe going out for an evening run for 3 or 4 miles. And I know I gotta run longer. And my mindset it's changing, and I can feel it changing. And I really am proud of that. But I want to, so my friend out in Los Angeles named Logan Gelbrich wrote a book called Going Right. And he says in there, if you're competing with me, you're going to lose because I'm not competing with you. And I thought it's so powerful, where he says, I'm not competing with you. I'm competing with me. So this isn't a competition between you and me. So I go out there and look at myself a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, and where I was mentally, where I was physically. That's all that matters to me.
Wow.
So while there's motivation, I love the social media stuff. I look at people who are working hard and doing their thing in a lot of different ways. I use that as motivation, but certainly not as competition, because those people who are elite, like Logan, like, his friends out there, like people in our lives, they're just competing with their former selves.
Wow.
And that's all we can do. And I've kind of embodied that, and I'm working on it, where I don't want, if people want to use it as motivation, great, but competition, I'm not involved in that competition. All I'm doing is working on me. And and that's why this ultra marathon was so much about that, where I needed to get out of this, funky mindset I've been in the last couple of years of, like you said, you leave sports, you leave this stuff. Who am I? What's my identity?
Yeah.
I know exactly who I am, and I need to make sure I remind myself every day. So,
got you. So do you think that perspective change has almost, when it comes to competing with yourself now, has that kind of maybe alleviated some, I don't want to use the wrong term, but like anxiety or stress or kind of anxiousness or nervous, like has it kind of, put things in a different light where you can almost achieve more, but feel less in terms of that stuff? Like, is it kind of accelerated your growth in a positive way in multiple realms? Like, does that make sense? Have you kind of found that with that approach?
Man, I think it's been huge.
Yeah.
I haven't said that I was proud of something that I've done, like to myself, even while I'm like, when I get done with it, there's always self-critique. And there comes to a point where you're like, man, would you do this to a friend?
Right.
Would you treat a friend every time a partner, came back from the gym and told you something? Would you go, you could have done better?
Right.
I mean, that would be a recipe for a conversation. If a friend of mine or somebody that I confided in, that I trusted, never gave me kudos, and why couldn't I do it for myself? And something about this shift in mindset was because I was always competing arbitrarily with other people. And then it started to this mindset shifted, where I have been so much more forgiving and complimentary of stuff that I've done, like to myself. And I always felt embarrassed about that. Maybe it's cocky. Maybe I'm like, I am sitting alone in my place. What is cocky about going, hey, nice work on that long run? Like you went out there, you were going to run 8 miles and you ran 10.5 because you felt good. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Instead of going, you should have run it faster. You could have run further. You should have gotten out earlier. You should have eaten better. Always this criticism and this shifted mindset where it's like, hey, I'm doing the best I can with what I got. And it's been a whole different change. And I don't profess to know how or why, but something about this, like, just completely erasing this competition with other people and just focusing on myself has improved that immensely.
Gosh, that's incredible. That's kind of like John Wooden's philosophy, right? Like he never talked about winning. He just talked about becoming the best version of themselves that they could possibly be. And as a byproduct of taking that approach, winning was found. And that was winning basketball games. That can kind of apply to anything in our life. And I know that certainly helped me, but I want to ask your opinion on this. So, I'm really big on optimizing yourself, again, becoming the best version of you. So I don't really, I've never been one really to set 5, 10, 15-year, 20-year goals, because I think so much of this, so much in your life can change over the course of even just a day, let alone, 5 years from now. Like, who the hell knows what's going to be going on? So I've just kind of been focusing on bettering myself each and every day. And just like you said, competing against yourself. But there's still something inside of me where I kind of need some sort of tangible benchmark to reach, to kind of keep climbing. Because again, like to me, I don't set these long-term goals, but at the same time, like I feel like I'm missing something in my life where it's like, where's that next step, or how can I kind of see where I've been going? Like, how do I kind of, track that progress, if you will? So, how you're kind of saying where you're just competing against yourself, like, do you still set goals in terms of maybe mileage you want to reach per week, or, maybe there's a time you're shooting for in the ultra? Like, do you still do that stuff, or is it just simply, I'm trying to beat who I was yesterday, and if I can do that, I can live with myself? Like, how do you kind of approach that situation, if at all?
Well, I did for a long time. I always looked at timing and, pace and effort. And I ignored the fact that our lives have so many variables, unlike other things in our life where we're, when it comes to optimizing our, whatever, our credit score, our savings, our this, or that stuff, there's very few variables, and you can hone in on exactly what you need to do to improve that. But I think to go with what you said about being the best version of yourself, I think one step deeper is being the best version you can be given your current situation. So the best you can be today may not be objectively as good as it was a month ago, but that doesn't mean it's any worse. It means that you're in a different situation mentally, at work, some stress coming in, some other life factors that you can't control have affected what your best looks like that day. But as long as you strive for the best that you can be that day, then you're successful. But when you look at the best you've ever been, and every day that isn't that is a failure, that's a recipe for a lot of stress and frustration. So to look back on all these different variables where you say, man, I can't control this, that, the other, but I know that when I come home, I'm able to, compartmentalize that stuff with being able to treat my partner with respect and love that they deserve, treat, my friends with that same thing, and treat yourself with the same. Understanding that, oh, well, I went out to run today and I only ran, I ran 20 seconds slower than normal and 2 miles less. Right. Well, yeah, but you're also maybe going through something different. So yeah, in my opinion, I think there's a time and a place for those goals, and certainly to be set. I love in The Way of the Seal, Mark Divine, he has a benchmark list of all these different, it's physical based, but it's important to do that. You can also add in your own, I want to read this many books. I want to, meet this many people, things like that. I want to have, a coffee with a new person every month, whatever your goal is in the social aspect. But he has in the back of that book, highly recommend looking at that. Okay. And you can gear it towards whatever you are. Obviously he's a decorated SEAL, and everybody who's reading that book is looking at it like, how the hell am I supposed to do that? But whatever, you make it for yourself. Yeah. And then you set it where every month or every quarter, every year, you do a couple of those benchmarks to make sure you're still there. And then the goal is to always be able to do that. So to think that in 20 years, you're going to be bigger and faster and stronger than you are now, that's also setting yourself up for disappointment because our bodies don't work like that. But you can still work your ass off and understand that these benchmarks of, I want to row 2,000 meters in 7 minutes. I want to run, 10 miles in 85 minutes. I want to do this. I want to be able to do 100 push-ups in 2 minutes. Whatever your goals are for yourself, put a date on the calendar where every, 15th of October, you test to make sure that you're still where you're at. And then your whole training regimen is to make sure that you're right where you need to be according to your body. So I like that aspect. When it comes to 20-year, 10-year, 5-year goals, it doesn't hurt to have some financial goals and some things that you can control with monthly activities, but it's really hard to, it's hard to look at 5 years of training and what that might mean, in my opinion, unless you're an Olympian or an elite athlete. For us, we want to be able to move our bodies in a lot of ways, and you can set those goals with benchmarks that you can test every few months or every year. So.
Got you. That's really cool. I love that. I'm definitely going to have to check that out. Have you ever heard of the book Unplugged, Dr. Andy Galpin? I forget who else was on there. Have you ever heard of that book?
I've not.
Okay. So first of all, highly recommend it. I think it's fantastic. But we were talking about the analytics of things, right? Whether it's numbers or this, and with these new ages of technology, we're trying to use analytics for things that analytics can't be used for, the intangible stuff. And yes, can it kind of enhance certain understandings or whatnot? But what they kind of, the whole premise of the book is like, just because we're tracking more and doing more in terms of this data doesn't mean that we understand any better. So when it comes to our own bodies and just like yours, like mileage and time and what, like, yes, you can track that stuff with data, but the different stressors that are being put on your body, whether it's school or work or family, like you can't track that stuff. And it's almost like sometimes we're doing ourselves more disservice when we're relying on our watch or our phones or whatnot. And of course, all in smaller doses, this stuff can be good for us. But if the sole predictor of success or failure is just what my beats per minute is on my iWatch, like that's not the game. It just can't be if we're really striving for betterment or at least optimization in all different realms. And when I read that book, it was probably 6 months ago. I was still wearing my Apple Watch and I just ditched it. I'm like, screw it. Because I was being that guy like, oh, how many steps do I have? What was my heart rate? This, that, or the other. And it was kind of running how I wanted to live my life. And once I kind of ditched it, I definitely saw better. I definitely felt a little bit better about myself in terms of what I was achieving physically per day. So yeah, there's some things that you just can't track. There's some things that just data and science just can't explain. And that's okay. I think that's how life is supposed to be. And that's the beauty of it. And that's the art of it. And that's why there's no perfect person out there. We're all trying to figure it out. And that's why bouncing stuff off of each other is so powerful like we're doing now. No question about it. But that's fantastic, dude. And lastly, the last thing that I want to kind of hit on for you, because I know you got a bunch of training to do tonight, like you had mentioned, talking about structure. And I know for kind of selfish reasons, I want to ask this question because whether it's the podcast or YouTube that I got going on now or what have you, I'm always trying to come up with new ideas and creative ideas and just new stuff that people are going to gravitate towards and that I enjoy kind of putting out there. But again, off air, you kind of talked about how structure creates creative outlets for you. Structure does that, not just like not having anything to do that day and you kind of just do what you want. Like, no, like structure creates creativity through different outlets if you can find structure in your life in some capacity. So for you, how do you kind of achieve that? How has that kind of helped your creativity in a sense by having more structure in your life? And how do you kind of navigate that perspective?
Yeah, that's pretty big. I think these days we have so many different outlets of media, of opinions, of people that some of it's pertinent, some of it's just us avoiding things we need to think about that time. And I think when you have a 1 hour task with 8 hours to do it, I tend to wait until I have 40 minutes left to go crunch it.
No doubt.
Versus, I have 8 hours and I have 8 50-minute tasks. I'll knock all 8 of them out with a little 10-minute break in between. But I think that's human nature. And it's just a matter of filling that with something, like the book Flow. And they speak to it in a book called Digital Minimalism that Cal Newport writes. And essentially flow is, everybody's probably read, into that, but it's the idea that you are doing something that has enough enough mental engagement to keep you interested, and enough difficulty to keep you engaged.
Mm.
But if there's not enough mental engagement, you get bored. If it's too difficult and you can't figure it out, then you get irritated and you stop. But
Yep.
finding that middle ground. So that structure where you can build around what drives you, something that you know how to do, but it still keeps you focused. And then to be able to really plan out that day, it gives you like this, the structure gives you an hour in the morning or an hour in the evening, wherever you work best, to allow creativity to come in, where you know that time is dedicated for it.
I love it.
So ditch the electronics, ditch the distractions, sit there with a pen and paper, think about these creative ideas, whether that's on a long walk or whether it's in a quiet room, whatever works for you. It takes figuring it out too, to say, oh, if I sit quietly, I get too distracted. Maybe I got a little music. Maybe I'm out walking in nature and that sparks it. But yeah, the structure for me has allowed this, this evening routine that my friend Josh Schultz calls the night sprint, where he does all of his stuff. And then for about 90 minutes in the evening, after dinner, things are cleaned up, before bed, he's got 90 minutes where he sits there and with pen and paper and just knocks out some ideas. He writes and he thinks and he works. And for 90 minutes, he has no distraction. And it allows him to set up the next day, talk about his previous day, think about these creative ideas, and just let it flow with no criticism, no corrections of, oh, that's stupid, whatever. You just go with it. And doing that a couple days a week, or even once a week, whatever the case, it can lead to ideas that when we start thinking, I mean, we don't have 10 seconds of our day where we're not distracted by something.
Right.
As soon as we start to think about something, we get a thought in our mind to look at our phones, to check email, to check our text messages, to do something. I mean, we cannot get just an uninterrupted few minutes. And that's, honestly, working out for me, going on a real technical trail run where you can't think about anything but running.
Right.
Or you're going to trip and fall. Doing that, going on either a long run or going in and working out and doing something where you just got, your mind focused on one thing, it really helps afterwards. You feel like you're cleared out, and that always leads to a good 60 to 90 minutes afterwards where I can knock out some creative work and get some, potentially mundane tasks done where I'm not always firing. So,
right.
I love finding that within that structure. It always helps.
Yep, that's perfect. And that's kind of like hobbies for me. And working out certainly is one. Golf is another. Exactly like you said, where you have to completely immerse yourself to find success in whatever you're doing, or else, you might cause yourself physical harm, or you are going to go out of bounds every single time on your drive, or your putt. Like, just to totally immerse yourself into something that might be physically or mentally exhausting, but almost like the counterintuitive what it is, like, I'm totally invested in that situation. Yes, I'm tired after or what have you, but like, I'm almost energized or recharged after the fact because, again, I was totally focused in that moment on that particular thing, but everything else in my life was completely irrelevant in those situations. And as a result, I can focus that much better afterwards. And yeah, that's exactly what I find with that stuff. And that's really cool. A hard run or a hard workout, or, again, that golf or tennis, like just something where you can't be focused on anything else but that entity. So that, yeah, man, that makes a lot of sense. No doubt about it. Well, Adam, man, I appreciate the time, dude. I hope you found some value in that, because I know I most certainly did. And yeah, man, best of luck to you at that ultra marathon. Do we have a time in mind that we want to knock it out in, or are we just kind of rocking it out and seeing what happens?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I'm looking at 6 hours, 6 hours, 20 minutes, something like that, where, this is a 50-kilometer trail run, and I don't have enough experience, with what those times look like. We're going to be going through rivers, there's not really much flat ground. So I'm looking at that initially, but like we talked about, I'm going in with the mindset of the fact that I'm out moving on a Saturday all day, that makes me pretty damn happy. So whatever that time comes through, goals to finish, but I'm going to go out and do the best I can. So
that's perfect, dude. That's perfect. I love it. Well, to kind of end on a positive note, and again, with the right perspective in mind, last question I want to ask you, dude. And I asked you last time, but I want to hear it again, or maybe it's changed a little bit. And the question is this: when we think about ourselves, and most specifically you now, 80, 70, 90 years from now, whatever, when your time is kind of come and gone, dead in your grave, but the impact that you have made on people is still around. They're still talking about you and what you did and how you made them feel. At that point in time, what do you want people to say about Adam Powers?
Ooh.
Dropping the hammer on you, dog.
I want people to know.
I know.
And I think that's always changing in some way, but
yep.
At that point, the legacy I want to leave, I want people to say when they were talking to me, when they were with me, that I was fully engaged and that they felt more comfortable with me than a lot of people in their life, just talking about how they felt, talking about the deeper stuff, never feeling insecure, never feeling like I was trying to one-up them or I was waiting for a break in the conversation to talk to them. I want to know that the genuine nature of our conversations and the authenticity was real and it was deep. And if that's my legacy, I'm a happy man. And I know things are going to change with families and in the future and all that. But as long as they know that there's, that I hold a lot of space for people,
yep.
in giving them that ability to be vulnerable without any judgment, I'd be a happy man.
That's incredible. That's it right there. I need to be a little bit better at that, fully present. Yeah, man, no doubt about it. Well, Adam, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate those insights, those perspectives. And I don't know, just to talk to people on a regular basis who think in different ways or think in similar ways, but on deeper levels or whatnot. Like, this stuff is so important. And I really enjoyed this thing today, man. So again, all the best moving forward. We'll link up soon. And thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No doubt. And to everybody else out there, that's going to wrap up another week on the Coach Cool podcast. I know this whole week I've been posting every single day in regards to the podcast, kind of cross-promoting the new YouTube channel. And I found some success with that. I really enjoy kind of challenging myself in regard to coming up with new things every single day to post on there. And also at the same time, bring value, not just talking to talk or putting it up to put it up, but to provide some serious substance with it. So I think I'm going to continue on with that trend. So be on the lookout next week for something new every single day. Could be 2 minutes. It could be 20 minutes. We will see. But the feedback I've been getting has been positive. So with that, I guess I appreciate you guys as you go into the weekend. As always, seek a challenge, seek some new perspective, and be ready to rock again come Monday. Okay, everybody have a great one. God bless you all. Coach Cool. Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and just listening to the podcast in general. It means the absolute world to me that you guys choose to take time out of your day and your busy lives to listen to me and the perspectives that I offer and the challenges that I give out and the conversations with the guests that I have on this show. And I very much hope it's bringing some sort of value into your life and you're finding benefit from these conversations and from these perspectives. And if you are one of those people, whether you've listened once or you've listened to all the episodes, I'm going to ask you right now, if you feel so compelled, to leave a rating and to leave a review, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or however you choose to listen to this show. I would very much appreciate that because that's how growth happens. That's how I can continue to learn and understand this thing from your guys' ears, not just my mouth, but make this thing more of a two-way street. And the more ratings and the more reviews we get, the bigger growth we can find and the more people we can reach with this thing as well. So again, if you feel so compelled, if you feel like this thing has brought value, I would very much appreciate that. Okay. But with that, I'm going to leave you guys for the day. And as always, I really, really appreciate you guys and God bless. Coach Coop.